campus of Salt Lake Community College in Sandy, the Utah Debate Commission welcomes you to the 4th Congressional District Candidates Debate.
Good evening. I'm Doug Wright, and it's my pleasure to moderate this evening's debate at the invitation of the Utah Debate Commission. This event, held live on October 15th, is part of the Utah Debate Commission's work to educate voters and encourage the civil exchange of ideas. If you're watching or if you're listening live, we encourage your reactions and questions on social media using the hashtag #UTDebates. We're on the campus of Salt Lake Community College, broadcasting live from the Gail Miller Conference Center, where we're holding the debate between the candidates in Utah's race for the 4th Congressional District. Tonight we'll be hearing from incumbent Republican Congresswoman Mia Love and her Democratic challenger, Mayor of Salt Lake County, Ben McAdams. The Utah Debate Commission has established a format that allows each candidate 60 seconds for an initial reply to a question. Many of tonight's questions come from suggestions made by those of you who went to our Utah Debate Commission website. We will also be taking questions from our panelists, reporter Glenn Mills and student Chase Larson, and from members of the viewing audience participating on social media. Glenn Mills is a reporter for Channel 4 Good For Utah in Salt Lake, and Chase Larson is the Student Association Executive Vice President. By the way, having already referenced the candidates' political titles from offices that they currently hold, I will omit those titles from this point on. Just prior to the debate, a coin toss determined that Ben McAdams will provide the initial response to the first question. We will then alternate who answers first on the remaining questions. And let's get right to the questions that people have. And it's important for every voter to know something personal about a candidate. There will not be a rebuttal for the first question, which comes from social media, and it's Amy Call, who asks, "It takes a great amount of effort to run for political office because of the time, resources, and support required. I'm curious to know," said Amy, "what your motivations were to run for the position of representing the people in Utah's 4th Congressional District." And Ben McAdams, we'll go to you first.
Well, thank you, Doug, and it's great to see you again, and I'm so grateful to see my family here in the audience, Julie and our 4 kids. Thank you. You know, Doug, 20 years ago, I was a student at the University of Utah. My mom, she was a school teacher, a single parent with 6 kids, and she couldn't afford to pay for my college. So I lived at home, and I worked 2 jobs to pay for gas and a car and my tuition. One summer, I decided to work extra hard, and I worked 4 jobs, starting at 6 a.m. and working till midnight every day so that I could save up more money for my schooling. So imagine my disappointment when the following year, when I was notified that I was denied federal student aid because I made too much money. Now, government regulations and rules, they don't always make sense, and they don't always reward us for doing the right thing. But in Utah, we do the right thing anyway. We want to know, though, that our hard work is valued, that if you pay into Social Security and Medicare for a lifetime, that those benefits will be there to support you in your aging years. You want to know that if you work hard, that you can afford health insurance for your family, that your kids and your spouse and others won't be denied health coverage because of a pre-existing condition like asthma or pregnancy. So I'm running for Congress because I believe we need a voice in Utah that will put Utah first, will put solutions ahead of politics and ahead of special interests.
And we go to Mia Love next, and we're watching the clock rather closely, Mia, so we'll give you an additional 17, 18 seconds.
Thank you. Thank you, Doug. And thank you to the Utah Debate Commission and everyone who is here and watching from home. Thank you for participating tonight. I'd also like to thank my husband, who is just the most supportive, incredible man I've ever met. And I wanted to just personally say thank you for your support and your love. I have worked really hard for Utah's 4th Congressional District. I have to make sure that every moment away from my children counts. We have passed, this year alone, My office and I have passed 5 bills in the House. We've passed a bill to help with wildfires. We passed a bill to help with funding for our schools. We passed a bill to help stopping taxpayers' obligation to perpetrators of sexual harassment. We've also prevented sanctioned individuals from accessing our financial records. We provide more access for credit for Utah families. To put it into context, Bernie Sanders, who is a public figure on the Democrat side, was in the House for 16 years and passed 1 bill, and that was to name a post office. My predecessor, Jim Matheson, took 6 years and was able to pass 1 bill within the 6 years, and that is honoring John Stockton. Now, I don't say this because honoring John Stockton is a bad thing. I think it's great. But people need results here. People need results in the 4th District. And I am committed to making sure I continue to achieve those results for the 4th District.
Thank you to both of you. And this question will first go to Mia Love. As I've been talking with fellow Utahns, talking with people in our society, it's so often that on the very short list, if not number 1, people are saying, what are we going to do about the national debt? We remember when people were screaming when it hit 15, then when it hit the outrageous 16, then 17. Now it's $21.5 trillion. Interest rates are going up on that amount. And the question that Utahns asked me to pass along to you, how do we deal with that debt? How do we deal with the deficit? And how are we going to pay when interest rates go back to, quote, normal?
Yes. So keeping our country on sound financial footing is incredibly important, not just to us as a family and to our sovereignty, to economic prosperity. And we've got to keep the promises that we've made to our senior citizens. And I have a 100% voting record when it comes to protecting our senior citizens. But this country has had skyrocketing deficit. And that's one of the reasons why I ran for Congress, which is why I opposed both spending bills in the House that added $1.3 trillion and pretty much put the debt on the backs of our children. I have 3 children that are counting on having their opportunities at life. I introduced bills like one subject at a time, which means that every bill enacted by Congress has to be limited to one subject, and that one subject has to be clearly stated in the title. Imagine if we were able to do that. Most of our states in the United States actually has that in their state constitution. Imagine if we were able to do that in Washington. So I will continue to work and make sure that we control the debt and deficit spending and work to get one subject at a time implemented.
Ben McAdams.
Thank you. You know, I am really concerned about the national debt. In fact, in the last year alone, we've seen my opponent vote to add $1.9 trillion to the national debt. That is shocking. And just to put that in perspective, in the last 6 years, we saw some news today, that in the last 6 years, the national deficit is higher than it's ever been. Now, Congresswoman Love, when she was running for Congress the first time, signed a pledge that she would never vote for any legislation that would add to the national debt. That promise has been broken. Now, in Salt Lake County, we balance our budget every year. I'm proud of the fiscal responsibility and balanced budget, AAA bond rating that we have at the county level. And look, it's not easy. It takes hard work to balance a budget. And we do it by working across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats coming together to make tough decisions. And we've done it, and every year lowered the tax rate at Salt Lake County. So we do need a balanced budget. I support a balanced budget amendment, and the national debt is at crisis level. In fact, there was a statistic that I read just a couple of weeks ago saying that we will be paying more interest in the national debt than our military here soon.
We are offering rebuttals tonight. I would ask our candidates to use them only when necessary, but we have 30 seconds, and to Mia Love.
Perfect. Thank you. And what he's referring to is tax reform, where he was talking about adding to the national debt. There's a clear difference between my opponent and I. I would rather give people more funds so that we can grow the economy and make sure we rein in spending in Washington than to balance budgets like my opponent has done in Salt Lake County by raising taxes every year, except for the year that he decided to run for Congress. Look, we know what Nancy's going to be doing with those funds. Nancy Pelosi continues to want to raise and do whatever she can so she can create more programs. These are big government programs, and there's a clear difference between my opponent and I.
Ben McAdams, do you choose to use rebuttal?
Yeah, I will just say, look, I support tax reform. middle-class families, especially hardworking Americans, deserve tax reform. At Salt Lake County, we have not raised taxes. The tax every year, as my opponent says, the tax rate is lower every year, and we've acted with fiscal responsibility. Now, that is in contrast to what we see at the national level. I know in my family budget, if we decide to make an expenditure, a vacation, or to buy something, those are fine decisions, but decisions like that have consequences. And it's the same thing at the federal level. When we make decisions about our fiscal policy that's reckless, that closes doors on future opportunities.
We turn now to one of our panelists, reporter Glenn Mills, Good for Utah reporter, for his question.
Here at home and across the country, people are growing more and more concerned about Social Security. They're paying into it now. Will it be there for them when it comes time to collect? Let's get into what you will do specifically to ensure that it is there for Americans. Specifically, though, let's really get into the details here. Are you willing to consider a means test, raising the age of eligibility, raising taxes, etc.?
We go to Ben McAdams first on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Glenn, for that question. We must preserve the promises that we made to older generations. They've been paying into these programs for a lifetime, and we owe it to them to deliver on the promises that we've made for them. You know, my opponent, again, has, in her own words, said that she would cut Social Security benefits, that she would raise the retirement age and privatize Social Security, handing the fate of our system over to Wall Street banks. That is troubling to me. I'm proud to have the endorsement of the National Coalition to protect and preserve Social Security and Medicare. I know that we've got to preserve that. The biggest threat right now to Social Security is the decision to expand the federal deficit and add to the federal debt by $1.9 trillion. That will have consequences. And as I was saying before, in our family budget, when we make decisions to maybe buy something nice or to take a vacation that we want to take, there's a day of reckoning for that, and there are other things we can't do. That's what's happening at the federal level, and that's where my opponent has spoken and voted to cut Social Security and Medicare benefits.
And now to Mia Love.
This typical unfounded scare tactics that we've seen used over and over again by national Democrats. We saw it long ago, and now it's being repeated again. Look, I've been very clear about this from the very beginning. We have to make reforms. Again, we haven't heard any solutions on this side, so let me tell you what I'll do. First of all, we have to make sure that we keep promises that we made to our senior citizens, those who are in retirement and those who are going into retirement. Reforms have to be made by people my age, because frankly, Social Security is going to be gone in 2034. Medicare is actually going to expire in 2026, excuse me. So just to say that you're not going to do anything means that you're going to completely let them go away. We were able to extend it with tax reform by 2 to 3 years. Now, for my age, I think that it's important for us to look at areas where we could save Social Security. If my husband and I, when we retire, make over $400,000, maybe we don't collect the full amount. Maybe we adjust the cost of living. Maybe we adjust those. But again, we have never done that and will never adjust or change Social Security or Medicare for those who are on it or those who are going into it.
Ben McAdams, a rebuttal?
Yeah, I would just say those aren't my words, Representative. Those are your words about raising the age of retirement, privatizing Social Security, and cutting benefits. We must protect the promises that we've made to those people who have been paying into a system for a lifetime. And again, the biggest threat to Social Security is reckless fiscal policy and ballooning of the national debt and increases to the deficit. That will jeopardize our Social Security.
And your rebuttal.
Yes. Let's talk about my voting record and what I've done. Voted for permanent repeal on the limited Medicare coverage for outpatient therapy. Voted to fix Medicare Part D to help seniors with high prescription drug costs. Maintain seniors' access to durable medical equipment, including oxygen. Pass laws that would require insurance providers to be transparent and so that seniors know exactly what kind of healthcare plans that they have. Work to protect seniors on fixed incomes with new Medicare Advantage premiums. Those are my records.
Let's go now to another one of our panelists, and we're delighted to have Chase Larson with us, who is a student, as we mentioned a little earlier, here at Salt Lake Community College. Chase, your question.
Thank you. As a college student, I am hoping to soon be in the job market. I know that in today's increasingly global economy, it is critical that U.S. employers have access to capable and qualified workers. What role does higher education play in helping close the skills gap? And what role should the federal government play in higher education in our country?
Mia Love will take this question first.
Thank you, Chase. The cost of education, the biggest problem that we have with higher education right now is the cost of education is rising far faster than the rate of inflation, 400%, and more than 4 times the rate of inflation. What we have to do is we have to align the education values with the education costs. I've supported initiatives like Know Before You Go, which would allow that we have a free market type of competition within these institutions, which Salt Lake Community College has helped us with drafting some of that language and is happy to compete with other institutions. As a matter of fact, we've worked with Salt Lake Community College closely to make sure that we are helping keep the costs down for higher education. But Know Before You Go is a legislation that would allow for people, as students going into a school, to see what they're going to get for their dollars. How many people have graduated in their area of study? What kind of money are they making? The most devastating thing I've ever heard is when students cannot graduate and after 2 years, they have around $70,000 of debt and they didn't finish their course of education. That's crippling our economy and it's crippling our students.
Ben McAdams now.
Thank you. You know, I mentioned earlier that I wouldn't have been able to go to college were it not for Pell Grants and low-interest student loans. And you know, my opponent has voted to cut Pell Grants and some of that student aid. I think we need to make sure that we have for our students that, you know, look, students are going to have to work hard. And like me, I think you're going to have to work. Sometimes you might have to work a job to try and pay tuition and that. But we've got to still make it affordable, that education is affordable so that it's still a choice for our future generations like Chase. One of the things that we've done at the county level, working, really led out by the Governor Herbert, but working to bring in the private sector to help provide training and job skills for those people, whether it's college or whether it's directly into a career, but that training's available for them to enter the job force. And so an incredible partnership that we supported with EdGoEd, that the Governor's Office of Economic Development, that brings people in and trains them for jobs in the manufacturing and high-tech industries, and they get some private sector support for that. So we're going to have to look at more options like that, but continuing support for Pell Grants and student loans is also critical.
Mia Love, do you choose a rebuttal?
I just want to point out that I would actually like to know if which votes, actually the name of the bill and the votes that we voted to repeal student loans or Pell Grants. You can't point to one vote because frankly they haven't happened. That's completely misleading and not true. What we've done is we have to concentrate on bringing down the cost of higher education so that when students are graduating, they're not spending half a lifetime paying the federal government back. I mean, it's crippling to families.
Ben McAdams, do you have a rebuttal?
Yeah, thank you. We can share those specifics, but just like your vote to cut Social Security and Medicare in the last month, you know, words are one thing and actions are another. And I hope that the voters today will judge us not only by our words and what they hear, but the actions that we've each taken.
As I was anticipating this debate this evening, and I've known both of our candidates for some time, the various roles you've had in our local governments, most recently for Ben McAdams, it was being mayor of Salt Lake County. For Mia Love, it was being the mayor of Saratoga Springs. I was curious, for both of you, when you were a mayor of an entity in this great state of ours, what's the one thing as a mayor, when you're sitting back in those private moments, you go, oh, if the federal government would just do this, what a difference it would make for Salt Lake County. What a difference it would make for Saratoga Springs. Well, what would that be, Ben?
You know, I remember with the work that we've done over the last several years on homelessness and working with Speaker Greg Hughes and Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, one of the big things we needed to bring forward solutions was access to treatment. We had people who were in crisis, who were homeless, and we knew that if we could get them into treatment for their mental health, that they could overcome some of the crisis and move to becoming tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. But to do that treatment, we needed a federal waiver. And as we worked and we worked and we worked on that, and all that time, it took 2 years to get the federal waiver. I think of the hundreds of lives that people who were separated from their families, who because of an addiction for which there were treatment dollars, tax dollars being paid, and we just needed a federal waiver, and the inability of Washington to approve that waiver. We now are waiting for another waiver for health care. And I would love to have a representative in Congress who was alongside us with a seat at the table, pushing forward that waiver to expand treatment, to get people back on their feet, get them a job, and help them to overcome their mental health issues, get the treatment that they need.
Mia Love, in those private moments as mayor of Saratoga Springs, what do you wish, as you recall that, do you wish that the federal government would have done or not done?
Well, I can tell you what we didn't do as a mayor. One of the things is that we were completely collaborative with our community. We didn't take developments like Olympia Hills and shove it down people's throats without anybody knowing about what was going on. We didn't go and to accept over $10,000 from developers who wanted to build over 9,000 new housing units. He greenlit the program. Mayor Ben McAdams greenlit the program, knowing that the mayors wrote a letter and didn't want it. He greenlit the program and continued on. And it wasn't until there was a public outcry that Mayor McAdams decided that he was going to back down because he thought it was going to hurt his congressional race. Now, I have to say, the things that I asked myself as a mayor, is it affordable? Is it sustainable? Is it my job? And the other thing also is that in the 10 years I was a mayor, not one issue was a Republican or a Democrat issue. And that's one of the things that I miss, because you have to still fix the potholes on both sides of the road.
We weren't really sure if there would be a rebuttal here, but I'm sensing there might be.
I think that, yeah.
Ben McAdams.
Thank you, Doug. I just want to say when the county council held their hearings on that development, I came forward and we heard the outcry from the public, and I did something that I've never seen Representative Love do. I held a town hall meeting, and I listened. I listened to the input of the public, and when I heard their concerns about transportation, about the congestion in the schools and other needs, I vetoed that proposal, and it was the right thing to do. And I don't care who's donated to my campaign. If it's the right thing to do, I will follow my constituents every time.
And Mia Love?
85 town halls and meetings that we've done. 85 town halls and meetings, public meetings that we've done. And Mayor McAdams may not have gotten the notice, probably because he doesn't live in the district. He lives in the 2nd district. But again, this is one of the reasons why it's important to live in the communities that you live in. When you have to drive in that traffic, when you see your schools that are completely overcrowded with students, you don't go in without the public support, and you put that kind of density without any of the West Side stakeholders knowing about the project. Those are backroom deals that we've seen in Mayor McAdams.
Again, we would like to offer a friendly reminder to our audience. We know you have passions, we know you have thoughts on this race, but please, respect to our candidates, respect for our time frame, and it's a distraction. It just eats up time. So again, I'll thank you in advance for your politeness, your civility. And right now, we turn again to our panelist, Glenn Mills.
Thank you. Congress has been promising to come together on immigration reform for years now, for as long as I can remember. Still, we sit here with no solution. What will you do personally to move immigration reform along, and what will that entail? A clear path to citizenship for dreamers and for their parents.
And we go to Mia Love first on this.
As a daughter of parents who immigrated to the United States, I know what it means to individual families. I know what it means to Utah, and I know what it means to this country because I know what it meant to my parents and what it means to me. We have, just to think that we have two sets of Americans in their minds and in their heads, ones that can seek citizenship and ones, no matter how hard they try, will never be able to seek citizenship. That's unacceptable. I have led out against my own leadership on a discharge petition so that we can get the votes to the floor, because frankly, if we are not able to debate bills on the floor, you don't have a voice in the House. So I pushed up and make sure that we did that. The compromise that I actually voted for actually had a solution there that helped with DACA. It had a pathway. It actually had border funding, but most importantly, I worked on this with the author of the bill for 2 hours, making sure that we had a solution for the families at the border, making sure we kept those families that were at the border. Now, it's not perfect, but it was one of the best comprehensive bills, and we didn't get one Democrat vote for it. And that's unfortunate when we fixed all of these problems. I'm going to continue to work for that because this is something that is incredibly not just important, but personal to me.
Ben McAdams, to you now. We'll give you a little extra time.
Thank you. And right when that vote was about to happen, Representative Love withdrew her support and that discharge petition failed.
Not
You know,
true.
I think it's important to know, again, to judge people's actions and the outcomes. As mayor, I don't get credit for what I try to do or what I say I want to do. I'm judged based on what I accomplish. And we need to hold the same standard to our representatives in Congress. Representative Love voted numerous times to defund DACA and to deport Dreamers. So we need to look at what she says in an election year versus what she says when she's not up for re-election. When I think of immigration, I think of Henry, who's a West Jordan resident, who is a DACA recipient and a student at the University of Utah studying chemical engineering. Henry doesn't know if 6 months from now he will be able to put that degree to use because he doesn't know whether his certification will be there. Thank goodness he went out on a limb and he's working hard to educate himself, but we need a Congress that isn't broken, a Congress that comes together and takes action, because words aren't enough, desires aren't enough, platitudes in an election year is not enough. We need a Congress that will take action to address immigration reform, comprehensive immigration reform, protect our borders, but also have a safe path for legal immigration for people dreamers who are here and people who want to come here.
Let's go back to Mia Love.
I almost can't believe what I'm hearing, Doug. We, even you and I, have had conversations on the radio for years that the residents and people heard about. We have talked about this for years. We've always been on the forefront and a leader on immigration for years. As a matter of fact, my Democrat colleague, Marcia Fudge, who told the Salt Lake Tribune, as long as I've known Mia, she's been a leader on immigration. And because Mayor McAdams has nothing to say but to throw insult, he attacked her for it. Talk about collaborative. If you're going to work with someone, you can't start attacking people just because they disagree with what you're saying.
Let's go to Mayor McAdams. And Glenn, I'm going to ask you to stay on deck in case you have a follow-up.
Okay. Thank you. You know, once again, words are one thing, actions and outcomes are another. Representative Love has voted 6 times against DACA. And now I'm happy that she's taking a position to support it, but we need outcomes. It's not enough. As the mayor of Salt Lake County, I'm doing everything I can at the local level. We just started a United for Citizenship effort where we are helping people who are here and eligible for citizenship to fulfill that process and take those steps to become citizens. We have adopted the Utah Compact here in Utah, of which I was an early signer and one of the authors of the Utah Compact. We're doing everything we can at the local level. We need solutions and action at the federal level.
Glenn, do you have a follow-up to your question?
Yeah, I'd like to get your thoughts on what was happening with separations of families at the border. What you thought at first when you saw it, and are you satisfied now with the steps that have been taken?
And we will do this without rebuttal, and we go to Mia Love.
Yes, what I saw at separation of the border was absolutely horrific. I have 3 children. I could not imagine being separated from my children. It is absolutely, I think, un-American for us to see families that are separated like that, children as young as 2 years old. Again, this is an area where we've always worked, and I do agree with my opponent. Actions speak louder than words, and I've taken some hits for taking on my leadership on these issues, but it was the right thing to do. And I will continue to do that because I don't take orders from the leadership. I don't take orders from the White House. I take my orders from Utah's 4th Congressional District. We voted and worked really hard to make sure that we keep what was happening at the borders from happening. Am I completely satisfied? Absolutely not. I think there's a lot of work to do still. And I think making sure that we go back and gain more and more momentum and support, not just saying no, not just attacking, not just, false words, but to go out and actually make a difference for people.
Ben McAdams.
What we saw happening over the summer and the spring with the family separation at the borders was atrocious. We are better than that as a country. We should expect better from our federal government. That happened, and then the results and the attempt to remediate that was not satisfactory. And even today, we're hearing intentions from this administration to continue a policy of family separation. That is not acceptable. Once again, we need to judge our Congress by their outcomes, not their actions or not their desires or their words, but by their outcomes.
We thank you for your responses, and we already are nearing the midpoint of our time tonight. I welcome you once again to this live debate between candidates for Utah's 4th Congressional District. We're broadcasting live from the Gail Miller Conference Center on the South Campus of Salt Lake Community College. Tonight's debate is between incumbent Republican Congresswoman Mia Love and her Democratic opponent, Mayor Ben McAdams. This is one of several debates taking place prior to the elections here in Utah in November, sponsored by the Utah Debate Commission to provide voters an opportunity to hear candidates running for federal office. Tonight's questions come from many of you who went online to Utah Debate Commission website. It's utahdebatecommission.org. We invite you to submit online questions for future debates as well. The website also includes an outline of the schedule for all future debates. And now let's go back to our exchange. And this one is coming to us from social media. And this comes from Leif, who writes, "What would you say to the thousands and thousands of Utahns who do not have health insurance through their employer and simply cannot afford private health insurance? What should they do when they get sick or injured?" And we go to Ben McAdams first.
You know, I've worked closely with Speaker Hughes, Governor Herbert, Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox to try and address this. And what we found is, first of all, Governor Herbert proposed Healthy Utah that would have provided coverage to about 100,000 Utahns who were in that gap. That plan fell short. It passed the state Senate. It failed in the House of Representatives. When that plan failed, I was disappointed, as were many others. But I went and kept pushing. And I see Speaker Hughes, to his credit, stepped forward and crafted another plan that could get support in the House. And it wasn't the full Medicaid expansion that Governor Herbert had proposed in Healthy Utah, but it was another plan. And that plan moved forward and has provided coverage for thousands of people. And I'm proud that I supported that, went against my party, and was the only elected Democrat to support that plan. But I know that plan has worked because I know many of the people who've received the coverage and help through that plan.
Mia Love.
We are still suffering from the negative effects of the Affordable Care Act, the bill that Nancy Pelosi, the party of Ben McAdams, and the Democrats said that they had to pass it before they knew what was in it. Let me tell you what I've done for health care. We passed more than 60 bills to fight opioid crisis. We extended the child health insurance program with the largest funding and the longest extension in history. We improved care for our veterans. We helped with Medicare Advantage Part D programs to provide enhanced benefits and services to our seniors. Now, the American Health Care Act didn't have everything in it, but let me tell you what it did. It brought the cost of premiums down. It would have eliminated the Cadillac tax, the HIT tax, the medical device tax. It had an alternative that would allow for risk pool sharing so that people with pre-existing conditions would be able to have their highs subsidized, and it would balance out the highs and the lows. And no one would be able to be denied coverage because of pre-existing conditions. It also allowed you to keep your child on health care coverage until the age of 26. Again, not one Democrat vote. Now, my opponent may be naive and say he's not going to vote for Nancy Pelosi, but if you watch what's going on there, if this seat turns over and they win the House, Nancy Pelosi will be Speaker of the House.
Do we need a rebuttal?
I think so.
Okay.
Thank you. As I've said repeatedly, I will not vote for Nancy Pelosi. I also want to point out that, look, I think it was wrong for the Democrats to push through a health care reform bill without a single Republican vote. It was equally wrong for the Republicans to push through their health care reform bill without a single Democratic vote. We need people who are willing to come together and insist on both parties being at the table to enact solutions. That bill that she talks about raised our premiums by 20%. It removed protections for pre-existing conditions. She's also talking about an age tax that you'll see your premiums rise the older you get. This is not a good bill. You know, there were flaws in the Affordable Care Act, but to replace it with an equally flawed or even greater flawed bill is not the solution. We need a bipartisan solution. We need people who will work together across party lines to do that.
Mia Love.
I find it really interesting because Mayor McAdams came into our office and talked about everything but health care. As a matter of fact, you can ask his Congressman, Chris Stewart, and not one conversation with Mayor McAdams about health care. As a matter of fact, the people that have come to our office and talked about what to do with health care has been Speaker Hughes and has been Governor Herbert. It's really difficult for me to hear someone try and take credit for something that they've actually never even tried to do.
All right, we're going to our other panelists tonight, and again, we're delighted to have Chase Larson from Salt Lake Community College here to ask his question.
Thank you. Many people are concerned about the environment. Utah's air quality is ranked as one of the worst in the nation and is a concern for older adults and individuals with respiratory problems. If elected, what will you do to improve Utah's air quality, especially along the Wasatch Front?
Mia Love.
Thank you. I absolutely love this state. We live in a great state, and I love the quality of life we have here. As a matter of fact, it was really nice to be able to run the Super Spartan in Eden with my husband and those who love outdoor recreation. I think that there are things that we can do. I am the only member of the Utah delegation that has joined the Climate Solutions Caucus. As a matter of fact, I see Mia, who is a young girl who came into my office and talked about her sincere concern about the environment. And I listened to her, and I listened to her family. And I also listened to the Climate Solutions Lobby. We had a town hall, which Mayor McAdams actually came to and praised our efforts and asked what he could do to help in that area. I think that that's one area where we've actually talked a little bit about the environment. But I think that there are some false choices out there that we need to get away from. There are people that would like you to think that you either support the environment or you support energy production. And I think that those are false choices. I think the two can come together as we've been doing in the 4th District and find a solution so that we can be good stewards of the land that we live on.
Ben McAdams, your response.
Thank you, Doug. I'm proud of my track record as the mayor of Salt Lake County to bring solutions to address air quality. And I'd be happy to talk about that at greater length in another forum. I'm also concerned, Representative Love talks about her membership in the Climate Solutions Caucus. Once again, membership in a caucus, words in an election year, that means nothing. What matters is your actions and your outcomes. Representative Love, her voting record earned her a 3% score from the League of Conservation Voters. Her environmental record is nothing to brag of. She talks about places where she's disagreed with leadership or tried to buck leadership. The reality is Representative Love votes along partisan lines and puts partisan interest ahead 97.5% of the time. That is not reflecting Utah's interests. She takes hundreds of thousands of dollars from the big oil industry and then votes to lift restrictions on air pollution, putting more pollution into our air and dirtying our air here in Utah. We need a representative who will put Utah interests first ahead of partisan interests, and that's not what we've had. And we're seeing the consequences of that right here in Utah with our air quality.
And we go for our rebuttal time.
We're going to have a rebuttal for everything. Okay, I've received the Climate Leadership Award from the Citizens Climate Lobby. I've been endorsed by ClearPath, by Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions. They didn't come from doing nothing. Those awards came from actually standing up and saying there's something that has to be done and finding solutions to make sure that we do that. And I just wanted to also address the 96%. That site that he's stating also says that we voted with Democrats 70% of the time. Let's be honest. Let's not mislead people here. Let's talk about the truth. And if you want to debate policy, let's do that.
Ben McAdams.
Yeah, coming back to the 97% voting record, a lot of bills do go through with bipartisan support. So the 70% number doesn't surprise me. What does surprise me is 97.5% of the time, Representative Love is voting with partisan interests ahead of Utah's interests. Air quality. You saw her contributions she receives from Big Pharma and votes to dirty our air. Contributions she receives from the healthcare industry and votes to raise our premiums by 20%. Hundreds of thousands of dollars from Big Pharma, and the cost of prescription drugs skyrockets.
We move to another question, and many people in the state of Utah have read the latest numbers from the Hinckley Institute of Politics and Tribune poll, in which our candidates are tied at 46% each. 8% are undecided. I'd like to give you each a minute. We won't do a rebuttal on this one. We're really getting a little tight on time. But 1 minute to talk to those that are numbered within the 8%. What do you say to them? And we'll go to Ben McAdams first.
We need representative in Washington who will put Utah's interests ahead of partisan interests, who will vote with Utah, even if that means you're not going to have a 97.5 partisan score voting record. Put Utah first. Now, Washington is broken. I will tell you that. And when I was looking at running, that was one of the things that was the biggest drawback for me. I love serving people as a public servant and the mayor of Salt Lake County. I love how we come together and we solve problems in a bipartisan fashion. And that's not happening today in Washington. And both parties are to blame for that. But we need to elect people to Congress who will put America first and put Utah first ahead of partisan interests and special interests. That's not what we've had for the last 4 years. Utah can do better.
Okay, Mia Love.
I think honesty and integrity means something. So I would like to say this. Of the bills that the Democrat Party voted for, Ben's party, or the party that I voted for, or the bills that I voted for with support of the president, are bills like instituting a balanced budget amendment, bills like giving our troops a pay raise, or banning abortion after 20 weeks. I'd like to know where he would have disagreed with any of those votes. The other thing I would like to also say is that I don't take my orders from anybody except for people of the 4th District. As a matter of fact, I'm the only one in this delegation that has stood up to the president when he has done something wrong and have worked with him when he has done something right, like working with me to help Joshua Holt come home. Now, Joshua is in the audience, so is Lori, his mother, and Tammy. My time in Congress meant something to them. It may not have meant anything to Ben, but I'm telling you, any family who has a loved one out there who is working hard and is concerned about them, they know that this Congresswoman is not going to give up on them and will have their backs until their child comes home.
Every time I watch a debate or even moderate a debate, I always wonder, what would the candidates like to ask of each other? And I'd like to give you that golden opportunity to ask a brief question of your opponent, and we'll give your opponent 1 minute to respond. There will be no rebuttals to this. So, Mia, we'll go with you first.
Okay, so I'm going to start first. I'm actually curious to find out who Mayor McAdams is going to vote for Congress.
All right.
Look, Representative Love likes to talk about my residency. I'm the mayor of Salt Lake County. 85% of the 4th Congressional District is in Salt Lake County. She has been absent on many of the issues that Salt Lake County faces. As the mayor of Salt Lake County, I travel every corner of this county, 85% of this district. I feel like I know every pothole and every blade of grass in this county that's being maintained. And Representative Love is not, she's absent. I would ask you, if you live in Salt Lake County, when was the last time you had an invitation to a town hall meeting held by Representative Love? Not a special invitation, but an invitation open to the members of the public. Salt Lake County has not been represented, and as the mayor of Salt Lake County, we need representation. But I won't stop there. I will also fight for the residents throughout this 4th Congressional District in Utah and San Pete and Juab County. I have traveled every city in this district, listened to the residents and heard their concerns and their voice. And that's what you will get if you vote for me, is a representative who will care and be there to listen to our issues.
And Ben McAdams, it's your turn to ask a question of Mia Love.
Yeah, I would like to ask Representative Love what she plans to do. You know, I think being in Congress, it's important to listen to the public. What you plan to do to better be informed and in touch with the constituents you represent, and will you do town hall meetings in the future?
First of all, I'd like to point out that he didn't answer my question at all. But, you know, I wanted to also talk about the potholes. There are a lot of them, I'm sure, because the Salt Lake County hasn't really fixed any of them in terms of our transportation. I live on the west side. I drive those roads. I live among the people that are there. I work with those communities. As a matter of fact, I've been endorsed by over 19 mayors in the 4th District. A lot of them who previously endorsed Mayor McAdams, who's been working with him hand to hand, and then decided that they didn't want to support him. And you also have to, actually, he did ask a question. I want to make sure I actually answer his question. What am I going to do? How many town halls? He hasn't actually received any of those notices. There are a lot of people that receive the notices. I hold open office hours because I want people to come in and actually have a dialogue with me. I will continue to do that. I will continue to go around and talk to people where they live, where they work and have them have an opportunity to come to speak to me. So I'll continue to work and do those town halls, whether it's on the phone, whether it's in person, whether they can have dialogue with me back and forth.
Let's talk about trade and tariffs for just a moment. The stock market has been reacting somewhat interestingly over the last several days. Many of our very, very close allies are acting or responding to what is happening here in this country. Seems much of President Trump's efforts are targeted at China. I'd like to get your response. Do you support the tariffs implemented by the president, and would like to hear why or why not? And Ben McAdams, we go to you.
I do not support the tariffs because I see the harm that they're causing to farmers and business owners right here in Utah, home builders, home buyers. Everybody's feeling the pain of those tariffs. Now, look, I will agree with President Trump on one thing, and that is that our trade agreements and the United States on the international stage, we need to be respected. And if a trade agreement is not fair to American workers and the American economy, those trade agreements should be updated. But I don't support the reckless actions that have landed us in a trade war that will do harm to the American economy and especially to people right here in the 4th Congressional District.
Mia Love, let's go to you.
Okay, great. I'm a free trader. I've always been a free trader. I believe that when products are allowed to cross borders freely, then soldiers won't. I have visited cherry farmers. I've visited Norbest farmers. I know what the trade war is doing to them. I visited with Vivint Solar. I know what's happening. I do realize that China's a problem. I understand that. They steal our intellectual property. They don't allow our companies to compete fairly in their markets. They steal our trade secrets. There is no daylight between anybody knowing that China is a problem. But why not target just China and then get everyone to coalesce around us instead of targeting all of our allies and have them coalesce around China? I don't agree with the strategy. I really don't. I've called him out. I've actually worked with Farmers for Free Trade. I've worked with different entities, and they know that I'm on their side. I've spoken with economic develop advisor Larry Kudlow and Peter Navarro, and I expressed the frustrations of the 4th District, and I told them they should really listen to us because we're the branch of government that's closest to people.
Do we have a rebuttal?
Yeah,
yes.
I would just say again, actions and outcomes matter. Words are one thing, rubbing shoulders with important people, but what actions and outcomes have we seen? Our representative sides with partisan interests and supports this president's agenda 97.5% of the time. It's one thing to say that you disagree. It's another to just be a vote that's taken for granted and on autopilot, handed over to partisan interests and special interests at the expense of people living right here in Utah.
Mia, do you choose to rebut?
Yes, I have to. Again, the mayor did not answer the question. In between the 70% and the 96%, I want to know where he would have voted against me or differently from me. Is it the abortion bills? Is it paying our troops? Is it balancing the budget? Because those are the differences.
I can answer that if that's a question.
Very quickly, let's just...
I would have not voted with Big Pharma to lift restrictions on air pollution. I'm sorry, I wouldn't have voted with Big Oil to lift restrictions preventing air pollution from going in the air. I wouldn't have voted to repeal Social Security and Medicare, to cut Social Security and Medicare. I wouldn't have voted to increase health insurance premiums by 20%, and I would not have voted to lift protections for pre-existing conditions. This is somebody who is voting 97.5% of the time with partisan interests and doing harm to people right here in Utah.
And very quickly, Mia Love.
I still have not heard. He can't even match the bill numbers with what we've talked about.
Yeah, sure I can.
No, you cannot match the bill numbers. We talked about this. You have not been able to talk about where I voted against helping out seniors. I have a 100% voting record with seniors. They know that. As a matter of fact, the op-eds before he actually decided to run in this district, op-ed after op-ed from senior citizens saying, thank you for helping us on Medicare Advantage. Thank you for helping us preserve our funds. It was the ACA, remember, that took $700 billion out of Medicare to pay for the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, we are getting close to a firm end time for the debate, and I want to make sure that my colleague Glenn Mills has time for his next question.
On this year's ballot, Utah voters are weighing in on medical cannabis. At the same time, many state leaders are lamenting that this is a failure at the federal policy level. Are you going to vote for or against Proposition 2? And what should Congress do to clear up this confusion and this conflict between local and national law?
And with sensitivity toward the time, there will be 1 minute, no rebuttal, so you can have time for your closing statements.
Thank you.
And we go with Mia Love first.
Okay, thank you. As a parent with 3 kids, I think it's important that we explore as much as possible. As a matter of fact, if my children were suffering from a condition and they needed some help and there was some help that was out there, I would hate it if government said that we couldn't have it. So I've long supported medical marijuana out of compassion, and we want to make sure that they are prescribed by a licensed physician and monitored by that physician. You asked what we were going to do on the federal side. I've actually introduced a bill that is going to make some changes to medical marijuana so that it can be studied, like removing it from Schedule 1, so that way it could be studied. The other thing also is I'm on financial services, and our banks are unable to serve marijuana businesses, which creates a cash and carry business, and it creates some public safety problems. So it's important for us to make sure that we change that legislation so that we could be able to allow our financial institutions to take in businesses and we don't put families in danger. But the compromise that is in Utah, in the legislature, that's the way we do things. And I'm proud of our governor and our state legislature for coming together and finding a compromise so we can fix this problem.
And to Ben McAdams.
Thank you. I didn't hear whether she's voting for it or not, but I will say I do plan to vote for that proposition. And the real answer does lie at the federal level. And once again, we're having to take state action because of failure from Congress, failure to act. And what we do need is Congress to change the schedule of cannabis from Schedule 1 to Schedule 2. That would make a difference. Look, I think Representative Love, I think she's a good person. I've known her since she first ran for Congress. But again, as I've said before, actions and outcomes matter. Words are one thing. Intent to sponsor legislation is another. We have not seen action on this level in Congress yet. And so I'm happy that now in an election year she's talking about that. But my biggest disappointment, Representative Love, is I feel like you've changed, honestly, that you went to Washington and we had high hopes and you changed and you became part of that Washington problem. And time and again, outcomes matter, words and associations doesn't matter unless the people in Utah see action and results from legislation.
At this point, if a rebuttal is necessary, it can happen in the final statement. We have reached the end of our allotted time for questions for our candidates, and will now move to the 1 minute closing statements. And because of the toss of the coin prior to airtime, it was determined that Ben McAdams would be first to go.
Thank you, Doug. I'm in this race to represent Utahns, not a political party or special interest. I've learned as the mayor of Salt Lake County about bringing people together to tackle our challenges. I've been frustrated with a Congress where members are too busy attacking each other and not attacking our problems. I know from my own effort of working with a Republican majority county council that balancing budgets and keeping taxes low takes collaboration and hard work. Bringing all sides together has helped us to keep our community safe and protect our air, water, and our green open spaces. The challenges we need our representative to tackle require that same determination and hard work. Families' health care costs are too high. Seniors are worried about their Social Security and their Medicare benefits. I've met so many Utahns who are working so hard, trying to take care of their families and save for the future. I've talked to a farmer and a mother who each worry they'll lose their health care due to a pre-existing condition. I will take my independent work across the aisle approach to Washington, where I'll put people ahead of party and do what's right for Utah, and I'd be honored to receive your support and your vote.
And our final 1 minute opportunity goes to Mia Love.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody who's been watching today, and I'd like to thank everyone in the 4th District for giving me the honor of raising your voice and representing your values in Washington. Hillary Clinton last week said that it is impossible for Democrats to be civil to Republicans. And unfortunately, we've seen Mayor McAdams, with the help of DC Democrat allies, come after and try to destroy a fellow American in pursuit of political power. Now, fortunately, I want everyone to know that I've received an unsolicited call from the Federal Elections Committee stating that not only were we able to keep our primary funds in this election, but furthermore, the agency agrees with the legal arguments that were made by friends of Mia Love. Now, I know Mayor McAdams was waiting and hoping that he would hear that at the end of the election. But this is what we have to deal with here. We have to let people know that honesty still means something, integrity still means something, and this country, under God, is still a place where the sun, our hopes for the future, and freedom will continue to rise. I ask for your vote. I ask for your continued support and your trust. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
My thanks to Mia Love and Ben McAdams for their participation this evening. We're especially indebted to the administration, faculty, and students of Salt Lake Community College for providing tonight's excellent setting. Thanks also goes to those who asked questions, including our panelists and those submitting questions on social media. A special thanks goes to the Utah Debate Commission co-chairs, Thomas Wright, Scott Howell, and Executive Director Nina Sliding, and particular thanks to the many broadcast stations who brought you this debate as a public service. The Utah Debate Commission would also like to thank the sponsors of tonight's debate, Merit Medical and the Kem C. Gardner Institute of Public Policy. The Utah Debate Commission reminds you the next debate is Wednesday, October 17th at 6 o'clock, featuring candidates for the 1st Congressional District. And a quick reminder to plan now to participate in the election process by casting your ballot on or before November 6th. In Sandy, on the Salt Lake Community College campus, I'm Doug Wright, thanking you, thanking our great audience, thanking our viewers for your participation tonight. And have a very, very good evening. Thank you.